Hello and welcome to week 6. It is always important to keep the basics of writing instruction in mind as you move through the week. Encourage daily time to write and set expectations, such as what the writing space should look like. Help students understand that writing is a recursive process that involves planning, drafting, receiving feedback, revising, and publishing or sharing. Finally, use mentor texts and models so that students can visualize a finished product. Keep nurturing your community of writers by writing alongside your students. Day 1. This week, students will continue to explore process writing. Before you show them the invitation to write, you might mention that process writing involves adding the steps necessary to complete a task. Writers need to think about their purpose and audience when writing in this way. In the students' Lit Lab guidebook, they will receive this week's invitation to write and to move through the steps of the writing process. The week 6 invitation explains that this week they learned that Ray Montague used a computer to engineer a submarine. They will use the space below to design a submarine or another type of underwater invention that could be built from materials around their houses, or even things they might think to throw away or reuse. We call this repurposing. After sketching, they will try building, and as they construct their underwater vessel, they will need to remember the steps they've taken to build it. Let's move on to the planning stage. Prior to initiating the planning activity, you might want to explain that the engineering design process starts with a problem or a question. Then, engineers brainstorm a solution. They design and build a device that can solve the problem, and then they test it to see if it works. Finally, if their invention needs it, they will work on ways to improve it. In the space provided in the Students' Lit Lab guidebook, have them design a submarine or another underwater invention. This week, they will use red graph paper to plan. Read the additional planning ideas aloud to them. Propeller, used to make the submarine move. Antenna, used to help the crew communicate. Periscope, used to help the crew see. As always, take time to nurture their creativity. Model the process for them and share your drawing with them. Whether face-to-face or remote, encourage the students to share their planning too. Next, students will move on to drafting. When it is time for the students to move from planning to drafting, have them use their composition notebooks. In their notebooks, they will write about their submarine or underwater invention, including the materials and the steps they took to make it. When writing with them first, you could start the conversation with, I designed a submarine out of different shapes, such as an oval, a rectangle, a circle, and some lines. Then I used an empty Pringles can, some cardboard, and straws to make my submarine. I'd like for other people to build a submarine in the same way. What are some ideas that you can give me to get me started? Then, model using the writer's composition notebook to draft. You can show the students your draft and read it aloud. Like Ray, I wanted to design a submarine. I used a Pringles can as the main body. Next, I cut 2 rectangles and a circle out of cardboard. I attached one rectangle to the back of the submarine and one to the top. I used the circle as a propeller by attaching it to the rectangle in the back. Finally, I used straws for the antennas by taping them to the rectangle on the top. You could encourage students to include their sketch along with their paragraph. They might have time to start this on day 1. If not, encourage them to draft their process before they return for day 2. Day 2. When possible, make time for feedback. On day 2, students can gather feedback from you and their peers. Have the students turn to the feedback guide located on the last page of the Students' Lit Lab guidebook. Using the sentence and question stems provided, or those that have worked well for you in the past, have students ask others to provide praise, questions, or suggestions. You can also prompt students to focus on specific aspects, such as their ideas, vocabulary, design, and/or effort. After the students have received feedback or have looked over their writing themselves, give them time to polish their pieces. Revision lists encourage students to focus on a few items to work on. These lists can be added to their composition notebooks or placed on sticky notes or note cards. You can model this process too. For example, the students might encourage me to add a materials list and what I use to attach the rectangles and circle. Now consider the ways that students can share their writing with their peers. Use the designated space or virtual background that signals the featured author. Have peers respond with finger snapping, clapping, emojis, or GIFs. Writing is a joyful act, so be sure to make time for reflection. This is an excellent way to build students' self-efficacy and identity, both as a writer and as someone who might pursue a STEM career. Questions could include the following. As a writer, what did you do well this week? What might you try differently next week? Which part of your writing makes you most proud? What did you learn about the design process this week? Could you imagine yourself becoming an engineer one day? Don't forget to capture students' work, words, and wonderment and add them to the artifact gallery. And as always, if you have any questions throughout the week, please feel free to reach out to me via email. I always look forward to hearing from you.